are here that usually aren't here. I thought about doing this, and I talked to Grandma about it first and asked her if she minded if I sent a message out to everybody. And she said, yes, I do mind. And I said, too bad I'm in charge of you, so the questions are going up. So I was really happy that every single one of her grandchildren responded and sent questions. And so I read through all the questions, and some of them were similar. So the ones that were similar, I just kind of put them into one question, kind of combined them and put them into one question. And then I wrote the questions out, and Grandma sat and wrote her answers. And then you're going to laugh at this, she wrote her answers in cursive, and then today decided that she couldn't read her cursive. So she rewrote all of the answers today.
Oh my goodness.
All day long, she spent doing this. So I'm just going to read the question, she's going to answer. We're not going to have any extra questions until the tape is over. And then if you want to ask her something related to what she said that's not going to be in the tape on YouTube, then you can talk to her about that or ask the question, okay? So we'll just try to make it through so that people have places to go, and also it won't last too long and you won't get too bored. And if the children come in, we'll stop the taping. Lori, if the children come in and get noisy, we'll just stop that and ask them. Okay? So, you ready? Okay. And if you can't hear her, hold your hand up or something. That doesn't mean call on them for a question. It means they can't hear you, so you have to talk louder. Okay, number 1. Tell us about your parents. What kind of personalities did they have? What kind of jobs did they have?
Well, my folks met in high school, and they had lots of friends, and my folks were very outgoing, and we lived in Chicago, and all the places we've lived, but in Chicago, my dad was with his father at electricians in a theater that had plays and so forth, you know. And I know one time he took me down there, and I was probably about 3, and I walked out on the stage. Stuff was going on. The other thing is my dad worked. Well, we moved from Chicago to Kansas City when I was 4.5 because of the recession or whatever was going on, the
Depression.
And the late 20s and early 30s, and in Kansas City, he had a job already because his aunt's husband was a manager in Continental Baking Company, which is Wonder Bread. So he had a job right away. And uncle and aunt lived on this block that they had, where they lived, a house in between another couple that he worked for Wonder Bread, and we became friends, and very good friends. And they had a daughter, Shirley, and later I've talked that she's my best friend for a long time.
The next question. About your hobbies.
My dad came back after he worked at Continental. He got a job at Hires Repair, and then he was a supervisor, and so we moved to St. Louis, and Marty was only about 2 years old, I think, when we moved there. And we only stayed there about a year, and then when we came back, my dad was in investments. And after that, he bought a business at the corner of 110th and Holmes in Kansas City, which was called Clifton Corners, and it was a filling station, mobile gas, and we had a store, very small, probably just about as big as this here, And the big sign up above was Clifton Corners, and to try us we may have it, because we had a little dab of everything. Medicine, ice cream, gloves, belts, you name it, because we were out in the county. And there wasn't, the three other corners were just farms. And one of the farms, the man and woman owned the house, and we had a really nice two-story house that was connected to the filling station on the corner, and had a big yard, and we had dogs. But I'm getting a little ahead here. Before we moved there, we lived on a street that was very, very friendly. And there's where my folks got my first dog. And it was Poochie. It was a little tiny dog. And after Poochie was Patsy, and it was a cream-colored spaniel. And then I saw it get hit outside on the street and got killed. And the next dog was, Patsy, Peggy, and it was a little chow. Only it was bigger than the other dogs, and it was Peggy. And then after that dog disappeared, we had Pudgy. And Pudgy, when my folks had a cox, what they call a Coxwell chair with a stool and all. And the dog went after her neck one time, because you sit kind of low when you grab it. So we got rid of that dog. And when we were at the station, we got another dog, and it had 8 puppies. Oh, excuse me, one at the station. It was at the house. And we kept one of the dog that had the puppies was named Jill, and we kept her. And my dad watched the 8 puppies look at the food and the water and everything and eat, and he says, that one in the center of the pan is going to be our dog, because it's really, adventures or whatever. And then we took it and we named it Jack. So we had Jack and Jill.
Now with all the P dogs, are you surprised she didn't name me Party?
I'll go back. When my folks left Kansas City, they moved to Arkansas, and my dad managed first he worked in a clothing store, and then he managed a drugstore. And at the drugstore, when we lived there, he started Little League, and my brother was, he was 11 or 12, I guess, and we've always been baseball fans, living in Chicago, the Chicago Cubs, and so he started the Little League, and my brother and all were, of course, played in it. And then finally, in the meantime, we had moved out to, where did we live? I'm trying to think.
You're getting lost, Mother.
I forgot to tell you about my mother. She was a good cook. She loved to knit, and she knitted my children little sweaters and caps and everything when they were born. And she also was a good reader. That's what she liked to do, is to cook and read and to knit. Before I was born, she worked in a candy store in Chicago, and she didn't work there very long because her father died, and that Christmas, New Year's, in fact, today would have been their 95th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
And they got married on New Year's Eve, and after that, I'm trying to think, got married. Let's see.
Ready for the next question?
went to Kansas City from Chicago, and I liked Chicago, and I liked going there because I got to go to the World's Fair in 1933 and the World's Fair in 1934, and my grandmothers lived there. And I spent all summers, I'd leave almost the day after school was out and go on the train by myself in a Pullman, and my folks would give the porter $1 and say, please see that she gets to bed and gets in her berth and everything okay. And so I went to Chicago, and that was one of the big things of my life because I had cousins, and my mother had aunts and uncles, and I got to learn a lot about my rest of my mother's family. And when my grandfather died, he died at 43. He worked for Wrigley Gum. And after he died, before my folks got married, that's why they got married young. And so my grandma would have somebody to live with. And that's where I stayed, and she didn't have to work because my grandpa was smart enough to have in his will or whatever you call it, what do you call it?
A trust. He had a trust.
Huh?
He had a trust.
A trust fund. And I said, you might be bored at this, but I said, there's not very many people today, or back then I should say, that at 43 years old had a trust fund. And he died at 43 and left my grandma. My grandma never had to work. And so that was nice if I could go and spend all summer with her. And my other grandma had to work, and she didn't live far from us. We could walk to her house, to her apartment, this one apartment. And I'd stay with her sometime, but I couldn't stay all the time because she worked. So, okay, I think I already did some of two.
Okay, so one question that came from one of the younger children, and you can just have a chuckle at this, and this was the question. Grandma Wright, what video games did you have when you were a child?
Of course, we didn't even have TV, so. In fact, I just thought of this, that when I was old enough, 6 or 7, to listen to the radio, and my folks had a radio that just stood like this, and I would sit down in front of the radio, and I would listen to Eddie Cantor and One Man's Family and all those things from way back, and it was what we had. I didn't have a TV until 1956 or 51, I guess I had TV.
So what was your favorite birthday? Or one of your favorite birthdays? That was a question that came.
That's not yet.
That's a number one. It's still back in number one.
Oh, my favorite birthday? I don't have any real favorite, but I do remember. In fact, I was going to bring the picture, and I forgot. I have a picture in the hall of me, and I went to Chicago by myself on the train to have my 5th birthday. My grandma wanted my cousins and everybody to be with me on my 5th birthday. And I have a real fancy top with a lace skirt. I mean, it was one dress, but with a lace skirt. And I really thought it was something to have a birthday party out of, in Chicago with my aunts and my cousins and everybody. So that's one of my favorite. One of my other that I think of is when Dad and I were going together, and on my birthday he gave me some most beautiful earrings, and I never will forget them. They had clear, like looked like little berries or something in gold. They were about like that big. I think I still have one of them, but I lost the other. But I do remember that. And
okay, we'll go to number 3. You mentioned this earlier and said you would touch on it a little bit more. And that was, who was your best friend when you were a child? And why was she your best friend? Or he, it could have been a he, who knows?
Well, I did have in Chicago, I had a fire engine car, and this guy, Virgil, little boy my age, had a blue car, and our apartment had a lot, and they had dug for water to go, on this lot, and so we would make between the water, we would make, it was a road, and I used to play with him. And as a little older, when I got in Kansas City, this Shirley that lived a couple doors from my dad's aunt and uncle became my best friend, and she was my best friend all my life. And she had a grandma up in a small town in Missouri, and my folks and we'd go up there, and they had a farm. And one time I forgot about this, one time she and I got behind the haystack and tried to smoke a corn pipe. They had pipes made out of corn. And she and I tried to smoke them.
How old were you?
Probably 7 or 8 or 9.
Colin, you remember we stayed with Shirley in California when you turned 13 and went on your 13th trip? It was her son that took us all around to Disney and NBC and everything.
Well, that's Shirley. She's passed away now.
Okay, we can go to number 4.
I wanted to, what did I want to say about...
That was number 3.
Oh, I was going to say, when we lived out on a farm, my folks moved out on the farm in Kansas City, and we raised, we had a cow named Jane, had a calf named Lucy, we had a pig named Anastasia, and we had a big brooder, big chicken house, and raised chickens. And then we also tried raising some fancy rabbits, white rabbits. My folks and another couple decided that they was going to raise these rabbits. And I had a different dog there, but I still had Jack too. And I know when my dad would come down the road, the cow would be near the highway, near the street. It wasn't exactly a highway, but it was a big street. A road, and the minute the cow, Janie saw the car coming and heard it, she would start walking to the barn right away and get ready to because she knew that she was going to have to be milked. And it was so interesting how that cow, and we call her name and everything, and how she knew what Dad was going to do. So I just wanted, and we had lots of chickens. We sold eggs and cottage cheese and butter, and one other thing, butter, cottage cheese, eggs, and cream. My mother, we had a milk divider thing that takes the cream, the milk stays in the cream anyway. We worked that thing, and we sold it to the people at church, and we had a really nice church and families there, and so they would buy the eggs and everything, from the folks. And when I started going with Jim, he worked at A&P with Dad, and he worked at A&P, which is grocery store then, and he would bring bread, stale bread from the store, and stuff that he knew the cows and everything could eat, or the pigs, actually, the pig could eat. But he would come out after work, and my folks would be sitting at the kitchen table eating cornflakes at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and he'd come down, and we were, I don't know how many miles, because he lived in more or less in town, and I lived out in the county. And he was so thoughtful to always think of the animals, and then he always said, "But that's an excuse to see you," because I maybe couldn't see him. Oh,
Okay, we need to go on. You ready for number 4? Can we go to number 4?
oh, I was gonna tell you, when I was 6 years old, my folks bought me a boy's bike, 26. I know a lot of people had 28s then, but since I was only 6 years old, I got a size 26, and it was a boy's bike. It was red, and I had to learn to get on it. I had to have a little stool to step on and to get on to the bike. And the reason I got the boy's bike is because somebody told them when they was looking for bikes, they said they were easier to balance and everything because they didn't have that brake for the girl's bike. It was straight across, you know, the bar. So I did learn to ride a bike when I was 6 years old. And
Can we go to number 4? Can you find number 4 on there?
number what?
4. So number 4
Oh.
says, name your top 5 favorite foods.
Well, Marty told me what they were.
I said I could answer that question for you.
Ice cream. Chicken, spaghetti, mashed potatoes. I liked brown gravy. I never liked the white gravy. My good brown gravy, and I did like sweet potatoes with marshmallow. Probably not always bake the sweet potatoes, but even canned ones, you know, we bought them. And I put up last that my mother made the best beef and pork, no, veal. Veal wasn't as expensive as it is now. And it was veal and beef meatloaf. It was the best meatloaf that I have ever eaten. So anyway,
Okay, number 5. So the next question is, that was submitted. Can you give just a timeline of the cities you have lived in and why you moved to that city? And you've done some of that, but maybe you can.
Well, I told you why I moved from Chicago to Kansas City for my dad's job, and then when Dad worked, my husband, your dad worked for
Grandpa. Your grandpa.
Hires, and he was sent to St. Louis as anyway, kind of a head over some things in St. Louis of Hires repair. And I liked St. Louis. That's when she was little, and Wendy was in a buggy, and the buggy was almost like a adult's buggy, but it was a doll buggy. Not an adult, but I mean a regular baby. And it was a buggy that my folks gave me, or my grandma, I think, bought it from Marshall Fields. And it was the kind that the body of the buggy, you could turn it so you could have the baby looking towards you, your doll, or out that way. And my mother had just had my sister that passed away, and she was in bed. And when they put it was Christmas, because my little sister was born on the 15th of December, and they put the buggy back in a corner in the bedroom. And they had me go in to see my mother, and I was talking to her and walking. I said, "Watch out, you're gonna walk into something." And I turned around, and here's this buggy. And I put Wendy in it later. You know, I mean, I used it to put the babies in it because it was big enough for a baby, not just a doll. You know, that was one really nice thing that I had.
So then you lived in St. Louis.
And then we moved back to Kansas City, and then from there,
Denver.
huh?
Denver.
Well, we moved to Lakewood, Colorado. In the meantime, I had a son that passed away, with leukemia, and after he died on it was I think his funeral was the 12th, and the next week, the 15th, we was on our way to Denver with Dad's job, and worked for an insurance company. Not my dad, my husband, Jim.
Yeah, Grandpa.
Your grandpa.
Grandpa.
Yeah,
Your grandpa.
Your grandpa. And I got off track now.
Why did you move
Oh,
to Kansas City from St. Louis?
well, we moved back there because the job ended with Hires. I mean, we came back and he worked for Hires for a while, and that was my dad, not your grandpa. My grandpa. I mean, my dad. Your.
Okay, then from Denver or Lakewood.
Anyway, he got a job with an insurance company, so we were transferred to Denver. And we went right to Lakewood. In fact, he picked out the house before we even got there because he was out there he was out here working already. And when we came, the girls and I on the train, and he met us, and then we had to stand there and wait because we had a dog that was coming on the airplane. The company paid for it because they were moving us. The insurance company was paying our way. And we always laughed about that, so I said, they gave us train tickets, but the dog got to fly.
Okay, move on. Then we went to Houston. Keep going.
Yeah. And then after Lakewood, we moved to Arvada, and in Arvada we had a nice home, one of the nicest homes we've had, and that's where the girls went to college. I went to high school, and from Arvada we went to Houston, and to Lake Jackson, Texas, and
So why did you move to Houston? That would be, these kids would really like to know that.
well, the reason we moved to Houston is because I wanted to be with my family as they grew up, with the kids. You.
So they moved to Houston,
The thing is,
and then the kids moved to St. Louis.
we went to Houston, and we moved there from Arvada. We had our home in Arvada, and we moved there. And she had a baby, and that's one reason we were going to move down there too, because the two boys were already in the home. And I said, "What did she have?" And her husband said, "I'm not telling you. You got to wait till you come here to the hospital." So we stayed all night in
Amarillo.
Amarillo, and then we went on into Houston. And he saw us coming, the car. He kept watching for our car to drive up, and met us. And he said, "Come on, let's see, come on." So we walked over to the window where they showed all the babies, and he said, "See, there she is." That was
Julie.
That was Julie. That was Julie who was born there. Yeah. And then from Houston we moved to Lake Jackson, and then from there we moved up to Plano after Lake Jackson.
Okay,
I lived in Plano.
followed us.
And
You followed us.
yeah, I followed them. So I got to see the kids grow up some, and he's
Branson.
got a story.
Branson.
When your dad died.
That's not about you.
Huh?
That's not about you.
I know, but I'm just saying, you asked me to come in, or I went into the bedroom when you came home from finding out about your dad, and we ran into the bedroom and laid there, and I went in there and tried to talk to you and calm you down and all that. You said, "Why do people say, why should I not like it, or why should I not like the people," or something. You said something like that. "Why should I be mad?" You said, "Why should I be mad?" You know. So anyway,
Branson.
we have to
Branson's
go
next.
back to where Jim went to the service.
No, don't go backwards, Mother. We don't have time for that.
No, but this is number.
No, you went from
6.
there to Branson, so you need to find Branson on there.
Oh, I haven't got it on here.
Okay, so then you went to
Well,
Branson?
we did live in Branson. We left Plano, I got it. We left Plano, and we went to Hollister, Missouri, and Branson, and we're volunteers for 5 years. I was in charge of the dining room, and Grandpa was in charge of the coffee.
Where?
In Branson.
Branson.
I know, but
That's
what
Stonecroft.
for?
The Stonecroft Conference Center. It's Christian Conference Center, Stonecroft. And after I was there a couple of years, we told you about it, and he came and worked in the kitchen and did all kind of activities, and helped in the pool. So then he told his brother about it, and so the next year Colin came, and then her folks, Becky's folks, missionaries, and they would come to Branson quite a bit, or to the Stonecroft Conference Center, and Becky was there, and so they met each other.
Okay, keep going, we're running out of time, keep going.
And the next year they came because they got married that year, and then they got married and worked down there too. So it was nice.
Then you came back to Colorado Springs.
Yeah, from there we came back to Colorado Springs because my mother lived here, and so did Marty. No, you didn't live here then. You
Yeah,
still
I
lived
did.
in Texas.
No,
and
I
then you
lived here.
moved back.
I lived here.
Oh,
We lived here.
okay.
We all lived here. The kids went to high school, and we all
But,
lived here. And you've been here ever since.
Yeah.
So can we go on?
Well, I was gonna.
It's just about where you live, Mother.
Talking about your grandpa, you asked about did he propose and so forth.
Okay, I'm not there yet. Okay.
Oh, I thought
Next question. How did Grandpa propose marriage, or did he? And what did you like about him?
Well,
Make it brief.
he didn't get down on his knees and propose. He left for the Army. I went to college for 2 semesters, and he would call me and actually kind of said, we're going to get married on the payphone. And so after 2 semesters, after Christmas, I came back home to Kansas City, and he came in April, end of April, and that's when we got married. And he went to the service for a year, and he was in Hawaii, and I had a job at a store, was a cashier, and worked on charge accounts.
What did you like about him?
He was very thoughtful, very kind, and what else did I put?
That's good.
He was truthful, and he had very good manners, and I like somebody that respects and has manners and so forth.
Okay, let's go to number 9. Can you find number 9? If you could go back and give yourself advice, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, that was very hard.
Just one thing, just 1 or 2 things.
I would try to give more of myself to others,
Okay?
and I would study the scriptures more and try to remember more scriptures. I know a lot, and still I have to kind of somebody start over and think about it. It's my age now, and
Okay, that's good.
we both were very active in church and taught Sunday school, and We're very active in, go on. Get in.
Where, do you know where you were when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
No, I was at home. I was at home with those things, with my mom and dad. And then with the moon, the man on the moon, all these things that she's asked me about.
Do you remember where you were the night that we saw the people walk on the moon?
Well, that's what I was saying, the moon. No, I don't exactly remember. I know I was home.
With Dad. Okay, what about when John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
Well, I remember, not sure where we were, but I know later we went over to the town because we lived in Texas, and saw where it was and saw the building where what's his name killed him and showed it.
Okay, but we did live in Arvada when he died, and we were at school, and we came home, and
Oh, that's
everybody
right.
just stared at the
Okay.
TV for like,
Yeah.
we didn't move away from the TV at all for like days, because they closed school down for like almost a week.
They did?
Yep, for almost a whole week. And everybody just sat in front of the TV and watched the TV. And what about the end of World War II? Remember that, when World War II ended?
Yes, Dad was in, husband was in Hawaii, and I was working. And I don't remember exactly the time or the date.
Because everything wasn't instant then. You had to wait a long time to get information.
Yeah.
Like those reels, those big reels of film, it would take.
I knew then he'd be able to come home because the war had ended, but they wanted him to re-enlist and be promoted, and he was too young. He was thinking about family and me and so forth, so he didn't decide it. But we went to the place where he was in Hawaii when we were there and saw the buildings and all he was at and worked and everything. Oh, that was nice to see that.
Okay, let's go on. That's interesting, and it's hard to remember back. So much has happened since then. What was life like when you were in your 30s? Someone asked that question. That's number 12.
Number 12. Well, we moved several times and changed schools several times. I went to 2 grade schools, or elementary, and then the folks moved, and the school that I went to only
Mother,
had
when you were in
6
your 30s, not in 1930s, when you were in your 30s,
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I was born, I don't think you were going
Yeah,
to
you
grade
were
school.
born, okay, excuse me.
Woo-wee. I know she was a young mother, but, do you have that or at all? Or we can go on. Let's go,
I had something about 30s. I thought I already did.
okay, let's go on. What decade would you choose to live over? If you could choose any decade, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, the 2000s.
Well, I
not
told
2020.
Marty, I said there was a toss-up between the 60s and the 90s, but then I got to thinking about the 50s and other decades. That every decade has something special. If you think about your decades and all, and in my 60s, I still had my father, and a part of the 60s, and the girls were in high school, and they played in a band, and we went to Seattle, and we had graduation in the 60s, and the 90s.
You had weddings?
Huh?
Weddings?
Yeah, and the weddings. And so as it was the 90s, I that's what I put, two grandchildren, and married, and I became a grandma. She made me a grandma.
Great.
And she made me
I
a
think
great.
he holds it.
She made. Oh hi!
It's my fault.
You made me a great grandma. Yeah. And in the 90s, we also, the first part of the 90s, we went to Stonecroft Conference Center,
Okay, we've been there already.
and that's where we were. And we volunteered there, and so that was a very special, one of the most special things we did in the 90s, was being at Stonecroft.
Okay, let's, for time's sake, a question was this. Can you name one or two people in your life that had a big impact on your faith?
Well, I put this couple that I stayed at their house when I was a senior, because my folks moved out in the country, and the school was near this couple. Their name was Ben and Helen Avery, and they became very close. They had a cabin up in North Colorado here, and we would go up there, and they were wonderful Christians, and he told Dad,
Grandpa?
he said, if you would quit smoking that pipe, he never smoked cigarettes, he smoked a pipe, and he said, and the girls at one time said, we're gonna pray, we all prayed that he would quit smoking his pipe. And so he was up traveling at that time in South Dakota, I think, and he said in the hotel, he says, I'm just gonna give up this pipe. And as soon as he came home, he put the pipe up in a pipe shelf thing. And so he told Ben, and Ben says, then I'm gonna see if you don't, since you've got the kind of job you have, you can become a Gideon. And so we joined the Gideons, and we both were very active in the Gideons. And I was, in Texas, I was three different positions in the state. I was state chaplain, state secretary treasurer, then state vice president, and then we moved. And then that was in Texas, and then we moved to Missouri, went to, anyway, I was a state officer.
Can you remember anybody else that was real impacting
Oh,
on
I
your
think
faith?
my Aunt Nell, when I was a child, and my grandmother, very, very, always talked about Jesus. And
Who's
we went
Aunt
to
Nell?
church. Huh?
Grandma's aunt, Grandma Jackson's aunt,
Her name is Helen, but they call her Aunt
her great
Aunt
aunt,
Nell.
her great.
I
But
didn't-
Aunt Nell is probably the relative of grandmas that I have heard the most about my whole life. And today, I'm kind of sorry I didn't name somebody with that name. Because of what I've heard about her, and she sacrificed her life for her mother her mother. She lived with her mother.
Well, Aunt Nell lived with her mother.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, until she died at 89, and then when my grandpa died, by then she moved in with my grandma. And she was never married. She worked in the Marshall Field Annex building at a corset and bra where they made. People come in and get measured for them, and she sewed those and made those. And she was the one that take me to a park that was a half a block away and throw balls out to me, and she'd sit there.
At you. Throw balls at me.
And Grandma would be doing something else, and she'd sit, and Grandma did too, at the pool. They had a little round swimming pool, and I would go there a lot because we were only half a block away from it. And so Aunt Nellie was just our life, and she lived after my grandmother did, and then she lived in the Presbyterian home, old people's home, until she was about 89 years old.
Even to this day, like even now, like last week, yesterday it could be, she talks about her Aunt Nellie so much, and she talks about her teaching Bible classes and
yeah.
having Bible studies and just impacting so many people for Jesus. And if there's one person she's talked about more than any other person, as long as I can remember, it's her Aunt Nellie.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great answer to that question, and we'll move to
She
the
was
next
my
question. We're going to move on.
Mine was my mother's
Right.
favorite. My mother's favorite aunt.
So a lot of things have happened in your life, wonderful things, hard things, really hard things. So a question was, what has faith looked like to you during times of tragedy and pain? How did you hang on to your faith, or what was important about your faith? I mean, you lost your father when he was only 60. You lost a son when you were in your late 20s. You lost a son-in-law. You've lost a great-grandson. You lost dad after 70 years of marriage. So what has helped you, or how has your faith helped you through those times?
Well, I think when Mark died, passed away, God was with me and gave me peace. What have I got here? I can't read it now. I tell myself to anyway, to take it. Other times it was God's will, and for me to, for Him to guide me, and He did guide Dad when we lost our son, and we just said that was God's will, and we just, I know different ones would say, I can't say I know how you feel, and a lot of people make that mistake if they haven't gone through it. They can't say I know how that you're going through it unless you've gone through it. I know this one Sunday school teacher was very, so very important in our life, and she came at the hospital, or yeah, she said,
Mother, talk louder.
She came to the church, I guess, one day and came up to me and she said, I don't know how you feel because I haven't gone through it, but she said, I know that we're praying for you and that you'll have the peace and that it was God's will, and you'll see in later years. Because through Mark's sickness, we had a nurse that was very close to us, and our testimony in the hospital and all, we heard from somebody that was later took their child to the hospital there and said that she accepted the Lord through Mark's passing. So we felt that was, that's what He was to do,
And I was only 9, but I can remember to this day in that church. It was not our church, it was a bigger church closer to in town. And I can remember sitting there, and behind us was this row of nurses with their all their different white caps, sitting there, a whole row in this big church of nurses. And the other thing I remember was the black lady that came and cleaned our house and took care of us for several years while Mom and Dad worked at the station. And then we moved, but they still went to work at the station, and this lady named was Ella, and we'd watch her get off the bus and come, and she'd come to our house and change her clothes from her clothes on the bus to her work clothes. And Mother trusted her with us, and her husband was a gardener, and he'd come and sit in the car and wait for Ella to get off. But she loved Mark and she loved us, and I remember those two things especially, and one other thing, but this is about her, not about me, but I just remember in that church, those nurses with those white caps, and Ella and her husband there. And I just, you just think, there was a purpose in all of that. I didn't understand it then, I was only 9, but if somebody came to faith in Christ, then that's a sacrifice that's very worth it, right? Because we'll be in eternity together. So Mother, I know there's other things we didn't answer, but it's getting late. And I want to ask you one more question, and that would be this. A couple of weeks ago, you were 94 years old, which is what you are today. So you're still 94 in a few days. So at 94, what do you hope for? What is something at 94 you hope for?
Well, it was,
We're at the very last thing, number 17.
I hope for a few more years yet to see Hannah married and Gabby and Hunter being parents. And I also...
Hopefully that's a few more months, not a few more years.
I also pray that God will give me a fast passing, and I won't be lingering in a hospital so that it lingers on and it's harder then to let them go. And I just love the family, and I want all of the family to live for Christ and be happy, and that's what I hope for before I pass. Is that you all stay, happy and married and so forth.
Could you hope that my kids get married too?
And she hopes Izzy outlives her.
Yes, I almost put that down. I don't want to see her. I don't want to see her die.
You shouldn't say anything about me. It's only about Izzy. Doesn't matter about me. So, Colin, would you come and lay your hands on Grandma and bless her for us? Thank you for sharing. And if anybody wants to continue talking, we have time, but we can continue this. And maybe we can just all stretch our hands out while Colin prays, and we'll all bless you together as Colin prays for you.
Okay. Lord, it's so good to know that our stories are really your story. And it's good to hear your faithfulness to Grandma Wright and her faithfulness to you. And just to be able to see how you've been at work in her life for so many years and how you've used her in the lives of others. And we know, each of us at this table sitting around here know the impact that she's had on us and the way that she's loved us so well and modeled her faith in you. We love her so much, and we're so thankful for who she is and who you've created her to be. Just a faithful wife and mom and grandma and friend and sister and so many other things. Just pray that you would bless her, even today, that she would just know your peace, that she would know your pleasure, that you are pleased in who she is and how well she's loved, that you would give her the time that she seeks, God. And we know she has the greatest promise of all, that she has a future with you, and that those that she's loved so much and lost, and that we will all be together again one day. And we love her, and we bless her and pray that you would bless her still in great ways in the life that she has left with us. Thanks for your grace and your love and all that you've done in her, and we pray in the powerful name of Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
One thing
Love
that
you.
really was great in our life, Dad, in my life, was to work with compassion, and it's such a wonderful organization. And Marty has gone on trips with people from Compassion, and met so many nice people, and they all love the Lord so, and it's just they do so much in this world. And I've been there I did 23 years, and I hope I can still go back someday. But I think Tony is working at home, isn't he? Yeah. Her brother-in-law works at Compassion.
Thank you all for submitting questions. If you didn't get yours answered, I'm sorry, but I know I was hoping for 30 minutes, but women talk a lot and they ramble on sometimes. But thank you for your patience and thank you for sitting here. And
You don't know
This'll
how many
be-
times I sit lately, this last week or two, that I sit in the morning and I start praying, and then I think of different people or different things, and look at stuff and think of Jesus and all the things he's, you know, I don't know how many of you thank the God when you take a shower about the water that we have. There's so many people that don't have clean water. And they don't have hot water. Marty has taken cold showers at the DR. And I just sit there and cry, and I think, oh, people don't know here in America how they've been blessed because they've got these things, and we've got gas and all these things that are just taken for granted. You know, when you get older, you start thinking more of those things, and how you've been provided those things.
I don't want you to destroy it.
oh, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm just keeping it so it doesn't go off.
You keep folding it.